Welcome to another episode of Wits and Weights. Joining me today is Paul Hanton to talk about different types of training, how to be consistent, how to get the most enjoyment from your workouts so you can reach your fitness goals. Paul is the owner of Hydra Fitness. Really cool name there. A personal
Thank you.
training company that helps career driven men lose weight without giving up spending time with family or friends. He's also the podcast host of the Healthy Fit Life podcast. Make sure to subscribe, which is focused on educating listeners on how they can improve their health through quick and easy tips to implement in their life. As a certified strength and conditioning coach, Paul has helped numerous busy men lose weight and improve their health. Paul was also diagnosed with Crohn's disease in 2014, but has not let that stop him from his fitness goals or enjoying life. Paul, it's good to see you again. Thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I enjoyed our previous conversation on my own podcast. So thanks again for inviting me.
Yeah, we just met. Maybe I think it was last week. We had a conversation a lot about body composition, and today we're
Yes.
going to talk specifically about training. You're an experienced trainer, a coach, and there's kind of a cool angle we're going to take today, which is having to do with people's inspiration and motivation for training, whether they enjoy it, different modes of training, all sorts of cool things that I want to get into with you. Before we dive into those, though, just if you could give us a little bit of your background relevant to this as a coach and trainer, what inspired you to get into fitness?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I've been in fitness in some capacity most of my life. So I did sports growing up, and then I joined the Marines, and then of course in the Marines, fitness is a really big part of being in the Marines and being in the military. Period. In the Marines, that's when I started working with a trainer actually, and got into bodybuilding, and that's when I started to really learn more about fitness and especially nutrition. I started actually having a training program and a nutrition plan and following that. And so I ended up over the course of several years have done 4 bodybuilding competitions. And then I've also, because I had such a good experience working with my own trainer and how much he changed my life, and still working with him today. I wanted to give back and help others accomplish their goals, and so I started training others as well, just on the side, giving free tips and tricks here
Mhm.
and there. And then I started personal training as a business as well later on. But it's really just about trying to help other people accomplish their goals, like my trainer helped me because he changed my life.
Awesome. So the value of coaches and accelerating your learning from that point sounds like the bodybuilding background. I could believe it. You know, you seem like a extremely fit guy, knows what you're talking about. And we had that conversation the other day about the importance of strength training, not only
Yes,
building muscle, but body composition and other
right,
things. But not everyone enjoys that mode of fitness, which is
right,
hard to
right,
believe.
right,
It's hard for guys like us who probably can't get
right,
enough. We're like, I'd go into the gym 8 days a week if I could.
right.
Uh, but so why is it then? Help me understand. Why do some people just dislike or even hate their training?
Yeah, and you brought up a really good point. When I first got into bodybuilding, I loved it. I dove. My trainer gave me a 5 day a week program and said eat these things at this time. I said great. I loved it. I still love it. And but when I became a trainer, that was my thought process. Well, strength training is great for you. It's really beneficial for you. Why doesn't everybody do it? And
Mhm.
so, but as I started training more clients, I realized I had to make an adjustment in my training methodology that not everyone wants to go to the gym and strength train 5 days a week, right? That and I had to incorporate other methodologies of training because what I'm more focused on is long-term health. And so I've had to adjust my mindset around training. I've been putting a lot of thought towards what to do with clients who maybe don't aren't as passionate about strength training as I am, but they still want to be active and accomplish their goals
Mhm.
or lose weight. And so that led me to this topic, which we're going to talk about, is why do people hate their training, and then what to do about it.
Yeah, and you touched on a point there, which strikes me. It has to do with consistency and adherence, right?
Right.
If you don't like what you're doing, if you're not going to come into the gym, is that worse than not doing the optimal program? Should we come in and be active in some way, shape, or form versus just sitting around and not doing something simply because we don't enjoy it? Um,
Exactly. That's
yeah.
exactly it. Activity is beneficial for you, and that's I'm not going to go into all the details of why being active is so beneficial for you,
Mhm.
right? That's I think a lot of people, most people understand that
Mhm.
conceptually,
Sure.
right? But I think there's a gap between, okay, you understand that activity is beneficial for you, but then a lot of people just don't do enough activity. And I
Okay.
think a large part of that is because I think, especially in the fitness industry, we talk a lot about how beneficial strength training is, which I 100% agree with. But then there's a lot of people that don't enjoy strength training, but they enjoy other things like riding a bike or running or swimming. And so I think there's a lot of people that kind of just quit after a month or 2 months because we push strength training so much when they don't like it. When we really should be doing, we should talk more about is looking long term and trying to incorporate ways that they can have some sort of activity that they enjoy,
Sure.
that way they can consistently do it over a long period of time.
So before we get to that aspect, you mentioned people will do it anyway. Maybe they think it's the right thing to do, or maybe they have a coach
Right,
that is just kind of stubborn and saying this is the way it is.
right.
Why do people push through anyway? They slog through, they grin and bear it when it comes to the workouts that they don't enjoy.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple reasons for that. One, I think that, and especially with social media or maybe our culture, we kind of push suffering and sacrifice. I see those words tossed around a lot. You got to make sacrifices. You got to, suffer through this, or you got to
No
just
pain, no
grind
gain,
through it.
right? Yeah.
Exactly. No
Yeah.
pain, no gain. Slog through it. Just get it done. Like all these other words and mantras, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that people take a like look at that and they think, okay, well, that's what I need to do, right? I need to give blood, sweat, and tears in order to accomplish my goals. But the problem is that if you're not passionate about or you don't enjoy what you're doing, then you're not going to do it for a long period of time. And the other aspect is, I think so I'll read a quote from Muhammad Ali that I thought was very, very relevant to this discussion. And so it's a very famous quote. You probably heard it before, but he said, I hated every minute of training, but I said, don't quit, suffer now and live the rest of your life as a champion. Right. And so I think people look at that or professional athletes and say, okay, well, Muhammad Ali says I have to suffer through and he hated every minute of training. Right. But in reality, Muhammad Ali is a professional but was a professional athlete, right?
Mhm.
Best of the best, a champion. But what people also need to understand is that Muhammad Ali loved boxing, right? He was very passionate about it. And so, yes, he may have hated some aspects of training and suffered through it, but he's also very passionate about what he was doing and he enjoyed it. And I think that's the disconnect a lot of people have is that they look at, professional athletes or people who take things to the extreme and think, okay, well, they're suffering through that, so I have to suffer as well. But they're also missing the aspect of, well, they enjoy it, right? Just like I enjoy strength training, so I have no problem with going to the gym and going through a workout. Do I enjoy it every single day? No, but I enjoy it overall most of the time.
So what about that initial hesitance when you're not familiar with the mode of training yet, right? It could be strength training, it could be anything really, where there's a hump you have to get over. There's like that initial motivation, or maybe even willpower that initially, right? And it helps to have a coach. How soon do you make the determination that you truly don't enjoy something? When you talk to a client, they say, "I'm not really into this," and it's their first session or second session. How do you approach that, knowing that maybe they will enjoy it once they build some momentum?
Yeah, another great question, right? And so if if I have a client who might not be enjoying going to the gym and strength training, right? We'll say doing a like working out, like doing a push workout or pull workout. One of the things I want to know is why. Is it because they feel uncomfortable going to the gym? Is it because they don't feel uncomfortable doing the movements? Is it because they truly just don't enjoy strength training? That's one of the things that I try to dig into, and I would encourage anyone listening who was also having those same thoughts is to ask yourself really why. Why don't you enjoy strength training, or why don't you enjoy going to the gym? And sometimes it's just a familiarity thing, right? They just need a little more time to get familiar with the workouts. And other
Mhm.
times it's because they just really just don't enjoy it, have zero motivation to lift weights, and that's okay.
Okay, so there's obviously multiple possibilities you have to attack. You ask the question why. That's a great question as a coach, right? Is
Mhm.
understanding the root cause.
Yep.
So, from one angle, I I see is an educational angle, right?
Right.
You want to educate your clients on the importance of activity, specific types of activity, and activity in general. So, how do you do that? How do you raise awareness, which then may reduce the friction of why they think it's not enjoyable? How do you raise awareness of why we need to move and train?
Yeah, so one of the things I do, it depends on the client. So I think that a good trainer is going to treat each client individually. That's not a mistake I made when I first started training. Is I treated each client as the same, right? I said,
Mm,
okay, you're going to the gym 5 days a week, or 3 days a week, or 4 days a week, right? And here's your nutrition plan. But then over time, I started to realize that I had to treat each client individually, take into account their previous training history, what they like to do, what their goals are. And so to your question, one of the things that I do is I make sure to understand their previous training history, right? So, like I had a client who had a really bad experience working with an in-person trainer, right? Which happens, occasionally.
mhm.
But her issue wasn't that she didn't like strength training; she just had a really poor experience working with an in-person
Got it.
trainer. And so I had to kind of coach her through, well, okay, I'm here. If you have any questions, any concerns? And we kind of walk through a program with her to help her understand the movements a little better and get her more comfortable. And the other thing I had to realize is I can't just throw someone off in the deep end and say, okay, you're going to go squat, bench, deadlift, and there you go. And so I make sure to incorporate movements that they can accomplish and they can actually do. And that builds momentum over time and builds confidence. And so they feel more confident going to the gym, doing the movements, and ideally they'll enjoy it, which is the end goal, and they'll want to do it consistently for a long period of time. But it's about starting where someone's at and then kind of building on from there to build momentum with what they're doing.
I love that idea, Paul, because I people will hear me on the podcast talk a lot about the importance of compound lifts and barbell
Right.
work and
Right.
squats. And, yeah, if in a perfect world I could just drop you in and
Yes.
you go to town, great. But you might be 72-year-old female with not a
Right.
lot of strength. Maybe you
Right.
can't even squat, not even down to quarter depth.
Right.
Well, where do we start? That's where we
Right.
have lighter implements and
Exactly.
leg presses and boxes and things. So
Exactly.
that's a great idea. So for this initial assessment, how does that look for in your particular coaching business with your clients? Is this a form they fill out? Do you come in and assess their mobility? How does that work?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I have a form that to fill out when they first start, before they start working with me, and before I start even creating their training program. But like most trainers out there, I'm a big proponent of strength training, and I want to emphasize that I think strength training is fantastic
Hmm.
for multiple reasons, and there's multiple research that backs up how important strength training is, not just from a weight loss perspective, but just from healthy overall
Hmm.
life perspective. However, one thing I try to do is to make sure that I incorporate activities that I know that they can do, one, and then that they're actually going to enjoy. And so in the form that they fill out, they do list out if, for example, if they enjoy working out certain body parts, or if they have a body part that they want to improve or work on, or if there's some sort of activity that they're already doing that they enjoy. And so I take all this into account and build a program around what they're currently doing, what I know they can accomplish. So for example, I have a client who started working with me, and he loves cycling, right? I hate cycling, but he loves it, right? So I incorporate cycling into his training program because I know he enjoys it. And so he does a hybrid approach of cycling and strength training. And he's been able to consistently do that. He's been with me for, I don't know, 6 or 7 months now. But he really enjoys that hybrid approach because he can do cycling, which he loves,
Mm,
and also do a little bit of strength training to help out with his cycling. So it works out pretty well, but it really just comes down to understanding the needs, the goals, and then creating a program around those goals and needs, but also making sure it's something they can start and accomplish. Because again, if you throw someone off in the deep end, they're just
yep.
going to sink or quit immediately.
Yeah, so it sounds like you have an excellent process to set people up for success from the beginning,
Yes.
understanding them as individuals as opposed to here's
Right.
a template cookie
Right.
cutter.
Right. Oh, templates
And
are
then
terrible. Terrible.
yeah,
I hate
yeah,
templates.
absolutely. And so what you get them going, what if then after a while they're still not enjoying their training, and so they don't show up on Wednesday and they're not being consistent, it's no longer fun for them. What do you do then?
Yeah, that's when a good trainer should start digging into why. And what you don't want to do is jump to conclusions or
Mm,
make assumptions for what's going on, because there could be outside factors that you're not even aware of, right? They could be going through a tough time at work. They could be really
Hmm.
busy with kids, with life. There are a lot of different factors you have to take into consideration, but it's always just starting a conversation. And again, you don't want to jump to conclusions and assume, okay, well, they're just going to quit or they just can't do the workout. It could be a lot of other factors. So that's the first thing I do is to make sure that I start asking questions and trying to really dig into what's going on. So for example, if a client like they missed a full couple, maybe two workouts right in a week, back to back consistently, that's a yellow flag, right? Okay, something's off, something went wrong. If they've been consistent for the last 2 months, but now they're starting to slide. Okay, we need to have a conversation. So that's when I'll
Hmm.
just reach out and ask, hey, I saw you missed a couple workouts. What's going on? How are things going with you? And again, it could be a wide multitude of factors, but it's always just a conversation that a good trainer is going to have with that client to better understand what's going on in their life that would force some sort of change in their behavior.
Now, are you monitoring real time, not real time, like with a wearable, but are you monitoring things like biofeedback with these clients as you go along to get ahead of that?
Yeah, so they have the option of connecting their Apple Watch or Fitbit or whatever
Hmm.
wearable they have with the training app, so I can see those stats. But I can also track how their workouts are going in real time. So they'll put in there how much weight they're using. So for example, I have a client who I need consistently. I tell him to lift heavier, right? Add more weight, add more weight, add more weight. But I can see that in real time how they're doing. So I give them feedback after every workout, so I can see if they miss a workout instantly, and then I can reach out instantly to find out what went wrong or why they missed work. And again, sometimes it's just life; they got busy,
Hmm.
but you don't want that to turn into a snowball effect. To suddenly they're missing, a week's worth of workouts or a month's worth of workouts, right?
Yeah, absolutely not. And that's where coach comes in, right? To give you
Exactly.
that extrinsic nudge for
Right.
consistency. You mentioned actually, I like the thing you said about basically progressive overload, ensuring that the client is
Right.
actually adding weight over time as one of the metrics, as opposed to just showing up. I think that's really
Right.
important that you do that. So that's
Yes.
cool for people listening. That's one of the keys to actually building muscle and strength, right? Is increasing the load over time.
Yeah. I want to touch on that really
Yeah,
quickly
sure.
because when it comes to progressive overload, we talk a lot about strength training, but there's also ways to progressively overload for any sort of activity,
Mm,
right?
good point.
So if someone wants to do cycling, well, there's ways to progressively overload in cycling as well by increasing the amount of time, trying to go faster. If same thing with running or walking, you can increase the amount of the distance you run or walk. And so when you talk about progressive overload, you have to make sure. And again, I don't think anyone should pour their blood, sweat, and tears into every sort of workout and activity, but you do want to make it challenging
Hmm.
and hard, because that way your body will adapt to whatever you throw at it. And so if you consistently challenge your body whenever you're doing, that's the way to go rather than just lollygagging through a workout. So I want to emphasize that whatever activity you do want to make sure you're challenging yourself appropriately.
Yeah, that's a great point, and the lollygagging thing is, I'll say it's a little bit, subjective for some people because I went
Yeah.
through 8 years of CrossFit and didn't get super
Mhm.
strong,
Yeah.
I felt like I was working out really hard though, but
Right.
there's
Yeah.
these kind of subjective definitions if we
Right.
mean, sweating and soreness and
Mhm.
heart rate versus, challenging yourself to muscular failure or to
Right.
speed on the bike or whatever metric. So that
Exactly.
now, if so, going back to if somebody just doesn't wanna lift, which
Yep.
again boggles my mind, Paul, but if
Yeah. Yeah.
if somebody just doesn't wanna lift, what would be the next best type of training for them?
Yeah, so I think when we talk about strength training, the first thing that comes to mind for a lot of people is going to the gym and lifting weights, right? Like
Mhm,
barbell, dumbbell, maybe even kettlebell, maybe not. But that's what people think when they think about strength training. And so, what I like to do is offer different training modalities when it comes to strength training. So, for
okay,
example, I tell all my clients to invest in resistance bands, and I encourage every single listener listening to invest in resistance bands because they're really cheap on Amazon, but you can do so many different things with resistance bands. And I found a lot of clients that they may not want to go to the gym consistently, but they love resistance bands because they can take them with them on the road. They can easily
mm,
transport them anywhere. They're very cheap and easy to use. And so that's one aspect I look at is, okay, maybe they don't enjoy lifting weights, or maybe they just don't want to do it 3 days a week. Well, how else can we challenge those muscles, right? And resistance bands are a great way to do that. I even have clients that just do body weight workouts because that's where they're at right now,
Mhm.
and they can't really handle anything more than just body weight. And I think that's fantastic as well. So when it comes to strength training, there are different avenues you can go with strength training. So like resistance bands, body weight. But you can also look at different types of strength training too. You can do powerlifting, strongman, CrossFit has aspects of strength training in it as well. And so it's trying to figure out, okay, what's a good fit for that client? Because they don't like just going the bodybuilder approach of 5 sets of 10 or 5 sets of 8, per body part. That's fine. What else can we do to incorporate strength training? Because again, I want to emphasize strength training has many benefits, and
Mhm.
ideal world, everybody would love to do it, but that's not reality. But we want to try to incorporate some sort of strength training in their programming if possible.
Yeah, so those are great examples of many different modes of training that still involve some load.
Exactly.
And the
Exactly.
resistance bands are great. I heard, I think it was Stronger by Science the other a few weeks back, talking about the ongoing debate about how much work you need to do to maintain your strength
Yeah.
once you have it. Because I
Yeah.
know we're talking about development of strength, but even to
Right.
maintain it, it's something like one eighth to a quarter of your typical workout. And just having bands and doing that for a while could maintain strength that you developed with barbells, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So that now, what if? So, have you ever met somebody who just doesn't want to do any form of resistance whatsoever?
I have not encountered that yet.
Okay, all
All
right,
my clients do some sort of resistance training, whether it's body weight, resistance bands, or going to the
okay.
gym. And I think a large part of that is I do push it, and
Hmm.
early on, to especially if they have no training experience, to start body weight, resistance bands, then doing lightweight at the gym, like machines, something easy, and then kind of build on from there. But yeah, I have yet to encounter anyone who doesn't want
Sure.
to do any of those things. Like
Right.
usually, you can kind of get them to do body weight at least, or resistance bands. Those are pretty easy sells,
Yeah.
in lieu of going to the gym. But yeah, I've encountered anyone that just outright does not want to do any sort of body weight, resistance band, or strength training.
Yeah, and the fact
I
that they
count
walk through
myself
your
lucky or
doors,
knock on wood.
yeah, the fact they walk through your doors probably they know they have a goal and want to get fitter and
Yeah,
healthier, and you're an expert. So right, if one of the first things you say is, "Hey, we've got to incorporate this," it's like your nutrition coach saying, we've got to eat more protein. Like we just do
right.
it. It's what we do, to get healthier.
Yeah, and the other thing
Um,
I'll add
mhm,
is I don't there I have clients who do all sorts of other activities, and I
mhm,
make sure
mhm,
not to take those away. I make sure
sure.
that if they enjoy playing soccer, they still have time to play soccer. If they enjoy walking with their kids, that walking's fantastic, and I make sure that they still have the ability to do that. And so part of it is just incorporating things that they like and
Mhm,
interspacing that with resistance training. So that way they get a hybrid approach, but which I still think is fantastic. So
absolutely.
again, like a good trainer is going to work with you on your goals, and I try not to take away things too much, right? As
Yeah.
best as I can.
Yeah, so it's the goals. The goals drive the
Right.
behavior.
Exactly.
What if a client has a goal to be a, because you mentioned powerlifting, strongman, things like that. What about endurance training athletes, marathoner, ultra marathoner, or like obstacle course race?
Yeah. So I still think there's benefits to doing strength training
Mhm,
for endurance running, obstacle course, whatever the running. Um, so like going back to my client who loves cycling, like he does, and he cycles a lot and goes far, way farther than I could probably go. He's in his 60s too. Like he's phenomenal, right? But what I try to do, I did a lot of research in terms of, okay, what are some strength training activities that are beneficial for cycling, and that way I can kind of I sold it as, hey, you're doing some strength training, but it's going to be beneficial for those long endurance cycling runs or cycling races you got
mhm,
coming up, right? And so there are strength training is still very important for endurance athletes or athletes that are more focused on like cardiovascular or endurance type sports. But it's all about just understanding the types of strength training that they should be doing, right? So if you're a
mhm,
marathon runner, then I would you don't have to go in the gym and do heavy squats, right? You probably maybe do like lighter weights or do other sorts of activities or walking lunges. And so it's really just about understanding. the goal that they have and what they want to accomplish, and then devising an effective training program around that.
And so speaking of goals then, I imagine you have a lot of clients that come in that wanna lose weight, wanna
Yes.
lose fat. That's probably maybe the number one goal, I'm gonna guess.
Probably, yeah.
Uh, and how would you prioritize the activity? If they just put their trust in your hands, they said, "Okay, I'm gonna listen, I'm gonna do what you tell me to do, and tell me what the best thing is to do." How would you prioritize their activity?
Yeah, I always prioritize strength training if I can, and then I interspace that with some cardio. I'm not a I don't enjoy cardio, so I personally don't do it all that often, but I
Mhm.
still think it's good. And one of the reasons I think it's good is because, well, one, cardio has a lot of benefits for you, but also it gives that my clients something else to do other than going to the gym and lifting, right? And
Sure.
so kind of breaks up the monotony a little bit. And I found that a lot of people, they like that hybrid approach of, okay, they're going to do strength training, they're going to do some cardio, then go back to strength training. That way, they're not doing the same thing over and over again. But they are, but it doesn't feel that way to them, right? Because they're kind of weak, broken up. Whereas someone else, and it really depends on their goals, right? Like if they want to become a bodybuilder, then I'll put them in the gym 5 days a week. It's purely strength training, a lot of calories, and they're fine.
Yep.
But for most of my clients, though, it's always a hybrid approach of finding out what works best for them. And I found a hybrid approach of incorporating strength training and emphasizing that, but also incorporating cardio or other forms of cardiovascular activities to give them something else to do
Mhm.
throughout the week, so that way they're not just bored and hating life every single day.
Yeah, and that's a good point about using cardio as a form of enjoyment if you like it for
Right, exactly.
variety, not because you have to, not because
Right.
it's a great way to, burn fat or anything.
Yep.
And you said you don't enjoy it too much. I'm kind of in that club a
I
little bit,
don't.
so
I
we have
don't.
to get creative. It's okay though. What
We do.
just on a tangent,
Yeah.
what are forms of cardio that you enjoy?
Yeah, so I'll give you a little backstory of my cardio history.
Okay.
So in the Marine, when I was in the Marines, we ran a lot, right? And so we had our 3 mile run as our physical fitness test, and I hated it. I hated running, hated every second of it, hated every step. But when I was preparing to go to Officer Candidate School, I was on a training program to improve my run time, and I
Mm,
ran 6 days a week. Now, do I run 6 days a week now? Absolutely not. I haven't ran since I left the Marines, right? Because I don't enjoy it. And that goes back to my point of, yeah, you can suffer through something short term, but long term, there's no way I'm going to go back to running.
mhm.
But what I do now is I do a lot of stairmaster or
Okay.
short hit style workouts, or just walking on incline on the treadmill for a short amount of time, just something, and it's more just to kind of break up the monotony. So doing something
Mhm.
different, but also just kind of getting some extra cardio in. I'm not a huge proponent of doing a lot of cardio, but I
Yep.
still think it has its place in time.
Yeah, I like that. Just making it fit. I know people that they love to lift the big weights, and I'm
Yep.
like, okay, go push the prowler.
Right. Yeah.
Because that's
Yeah.
like,
Exactly.
big manly thing. You get to push this heavy
Yeah.
sled. You're like a football player. Guess what? You're getting cardio. So, and you probably get a lot of cardio just doing heavy deadlifts. Let's be honest, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You can incorporate some types
Yeah.
of cardio while in your strength training as well, and
Yeah.
that's the beauty of it.
So continuing on the theme of with a client who has a specific goal, and you mentioned a bodybuilder, for example,
Yep.
do you encounter situations where they're maybe doing too much of something they shouldn't be doing, and you have to coach them to back off on that?
Yeah, I think commonly, and probably other trainers experience this as well, as people doing too much cardio
Mhm.
and emphasizing that. And some part of that's just education, right? And I think the fitness industry, we're doing a really good job of that, of emphasizing strength training and coming around to emphasizing that over, hours of cardio. And so when it comes to someone who has a very specific goal, um, it really depends on what the goal is and crafting your training program around that goal. But in the case of a bodybuilder, obviously you're going to have them lift, heavy in the gym and lift weights, because there's no other way around that. And I think that's a really key consideration. If someone has a very specific goal, then their training is going to be have to be very specific to match that specific goal. And there's no way around that, right? If you want to run a marathon, well, what sort of training are you gonna have to do, right? You're gonna have to go run a lot. If you want to be bodybuilder, you have to lift a lot. And so I think for anyone listening, if they do have a very specific goal, and then that training is going to be very specific, and they're either going to have to kind of suck it up and go do it, or just not do it at all.
And is there a way to is there a way to change it for the individual with things like your programming, your periodization, mesocycles? So we don't have to get too technical, but things like that.
Yeah, there are ways to do that, and I think that if they have a specific goal, especially if they're wanting to do a competition, then that periodization is very key,
Mm.
and then crafting a really solid training program around that goal. And again, we keep talking about goals because that's
Mhm.
extremely crucial because your training has to help with that goal in terms of what you want to accomplish. And nutrition's a whole another thing that
Mhm.
also has to be aligned with your goal. But it all comes back to your goals and what you want to accomplish. And even for someone who just wants to lose weight or improve their health, that's still a goal, and your training has to match that goal. And it may not be extreme amounts of training, but there's still going to be something involved there. You need a good training program in order to accomplish any sort of goal.
That's right. Good training program. So if they're reaching out to you, Paul, are you in person, online, both? What's your mode of operation here?
Yeah, no, I'm online.
Yep.
I do occasionally in person here and there, but most of my clients are online around the US.
And how does someone get feedback from you on, for example, their form and technique, which is really important when you get started?
Yes, yep, form and technique. So that's a really good question, especially when you're training online. So there's a couple avenues, tools that I use. One, I'll have them record themselves,
Okay.
especially if it's a technique that they haven't done before. So, for example, deadlift or squat, right, or even a bench too. I'll have them record themselves and send me the video. That way, I can critique their form. However, I always make sure to, if they're new to a lift, I always kind of progressively get there. So, for example, if
Hmm.
someone's never done a squat before, I don't automatically say, okay, here, go do 5, 6, or 10 on the squat rack. Try to work their way up, even if I have to start at, okay, you're doing air squats
Hmm.
first, right? And then then we'll progress up to even a Smith machine, and then we'll do just the bar, right? And so we'll kind of build our way up to that point depending on where they're at. But I always start with where they're at first, and then kind of build my way up from there on where they need to go.
Yeah, it makes sense. And I imagine even once they get to the full movement, it could take weeks or months for people to really nail
Absolutely, yeah,
down the form.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Cool. All right. I like to ask this question of all guests, but
yeah,
is there a question you wish I had asked? And what is your answer?
yeah. When we talk about someone hating their training or not liking their training, one thing that people may be thinking about or wondering is, well, I've tried all these things, right, and I haven't found anything that I liked. And I would say to them, I don't believe you, but let's say, for argument's sake, that they tried every single activity. I would say that they should start with walking. And I think, again, a lot of people uh, underrate walking, but
Mm.
walking is still can be still a fantastic activity to do. You could throw on a podcast or music, or even watch Netflix and go for a walk. But that's a really good starting point if there's nothing else out there that you feel like you enjoy. And you could even progressively overload on walking to an
Mm.
extent, right? You can challenge yourself to go farther. You can go faster. You can hop on a treadmill and just up the incline and start doing treadmill walking. And so I would just say, if there's nothing out there at all and they've tried everything else, just go for a walk, right? And start going for walks, 30 minutes, maybe 3 times a week, then 4 times a week, then build on from there. But at the end of the day, you want to be active, right? Our bodies are made to be active, and it's important to be active for numerous amounts of reasons. But it's just finding out, again, what activity is something that you can enjoy for a long period of time. And if once you find that activity, it's life changing, right? And then you'll be doing that activity for the rest of your life, ideally.
So there's something for everyone when it comes to movement, for
I think
sure.
there's something for everyone. I think there's something for everyone. Yes, he's got to figure out what that is.
And the talk of you being in the military and walking makes me want to grab my rucksack because there's another way
Uh,
to load your walking.
You're
Yeah.
absolutely right. Yeah,
Yeah.
you could, grab a backpack, throw some weight in there, and then take off, right? And hiking is a great activity as well. If
True.
you want to go for hikes, and you can make that challenging. You can make any activity challenging enough, but it's just finding out what works best for you. for me, it's strength training, right? I fell in love with it on day one, and I see myself doing that, doing strength training in some capacity for the rest of my life. And I'm glad I found my activity or my thing that I like to do. And again, once you find that activity, it's life changing, right? It will change your life once you find that activity that you enjoy and you want to do for the rest of your life.
Yeah, it's about consistency. And guys who are listening, ladies, if you want a great trainer, Paul's your man. And I'm just going to ask you, Paul, where can listeners find out more about you and your work?
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm on Instagram and TikTok at PaulFitPrime. Again, that's at PaulFitPrime. Also, check out my podcast, the Healthy Fit Life podcast. It's on any podcast platform you can think of. And again, I want to thank you again for having me on your show. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Likewise. And I'm going to add all that info to the show notes, of course, so people can find you. It was fun talking about kind of a different angle with when it comes to mindset, the emotions, goals, individuality with training. I think a lot of people listening, wonder where to start and where to go and how to make this
Right,
fun and not make it a
right,
chore. And
right.
you just gave them a bunch of great answers. So I appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, thank you. It was a great conversation.